Afternoon. I hope you are finding all the good lunch places. And state you may call your next witness.
Timothy Whitehurst.
Solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
May it please the court.
You may proceed.
Can you tell us your name, sir, and please spell your first and last names?
Timothy Earl Whitehurst, Timothy Whitehurst.
What do you do for a living, sir?
I work for HD Supply as a project manager.
On April 24th of 2018, what were you doing for a living?
Working for HD Supply.
Do you know somebody named Jim or James Cooper?
I do.
How do you know that person?
We're co-workers.
And were you working with him together on April 24th of 2018?
We were
Where were you all working?
here in Orlando.
And where was the site?
I don't recall the first site. It was over on the south. I'm not familiar with Orlando because I'm from Tampa. South part of Orlando, I believe. It was an apartment complex, one that we were proposing to do some renovations at the time. Jim was in training, so he was tagging along with me to kind of meet customers and get broken in. And then after that, we had lunch with some coworkers. And then in the afternoon, we went to a hospitality property, a hotel, Hampton Inn or something like that, Buena Vista, Lake Buena Vista area.
And so what were the work hours approximately that day?
We met around 10 o'clock in the morning and then departed around 2:30 in the afternoon.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions?
No questions.
May this witness be excused from subpoena?
Yes, ma'am.
Any objection, defense?
No.
Thank you. You may step down. You are excused.
Thank you.
State you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the state calls Adam Frank. Frank?
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the record?
My name's Adam Frank, F-R-A in.
And where do you work?
The name of my firm is MDD Forensic Accountants, and I work in the Orlando office.
And what is your job title?
I'm a senior manager.
And so if you could just describe to the jury, what does a senior manager at your firm do?
I oversee a number of staff. I also am typically retained to quantify economic damages and also to provide forensic analysis for financial records of various entities.
Okay. And what is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's from the University of Central Florida, also a master's degree in accounting, also certified public accountant, certified fraud examiner, and a certified in financial forensics.
And to get those certifications, if you could just explain to the jury what it is that you have to do.
Yeah, to get a CPA, you have to have, I believe it's 150 graduate hours. So after high school, you have to sit for a 4-part exam. You also have to sit for an exam for CFE, which is a fraud examiner's license, and you have to have relevant experience to have a CFF, which is certified in financial forensics.
All right. Do you have any other training and experience that enables you to do your job that you've gotten along the way?
I do. I've been with my firm for 18 years. We are strictly forensic accounting firm. That's all I do. Do various forensic accounting engagements. I've been retained as an expert witness both in state and federal court.
And were you contacted by the state attorney's office to do some work in this case?
I was.
What were you asked to do?
We were asked to do a forensic analysis of certain bank accounts that belong to David Cooper-Tronnes and his entities, or Shanti Cooper-Tronnes and her entities.
Okay. And were you paid for your work?
I was.
Information were you given to review?
I believe it was 23 different bank accounts. I believe there were 10 Wells Fargo, 8 Bank of America accounts, 1 Charles Schwab, and then there were 4 AXA accounts.
And permission to approach opposing counsel, showing opposing counsel mark identification as states for ID BD, BE, BF, and BG. Permission to approach the witness?
May?
Let the record reflect that I'm showing the witness what's been marked for identification purposes as, oh, they don't have the card. Let me go over and do that first. Commissioner, will you approach the witness, Your Honor?
May?
All right. Let the record reflect that I'm now showing the witness what's been marked for identification as states BD, BE, BF, and BG. If you could just take a look at these, do you recognize them?
Yes.
Do these CDs contain the records from accounts you reviewed from Wells Fargo, Bank of America, AXA, and Charles Schwab?
They do.
Are they a fair and accurate representation of the records?
Yes.
At this time, the state offers what's previously marked for identification as states BD, BE, BF, and BG.
Any objection? No. 62, 63, 64, 65.
Okay, so you got the records. Were those records sent to you by the state attorney's office?
Yes.
Okay. And then what did you do when you received those records?
We performed forensic analysis of the bank statements. Basically, we're analyzing the transactions, taking the approximate month-end balances, and we summarized them into a spreadsheet.
And does that spreadsheet begin with account entries going back to January of 2013?
Yes, I believe so.
And then did you ultimately go through in that analysis January of 2020?
We did. At some point, some of the statements we didn't continue to get, but so there may be some gaps, but I believe the last one was through that date.
Okay, so you just went through, obviously, the records that you received.
Right. Whatever was provided to us is what we reviewed.
And did you prepare a chart of essentially your findings related to account balances during that time period?
We did.
Okay. Let the record reflect, I'm showing opposing counsel with the mark for identification as states CB. Permission to approach the witness?
I'm sorry, counsel, what was the CB?
CB.
Thank you.
Let the record reflect, I'm showing the witness what's been marked for identification as CB. If you could just take a look at this and let me know once you've had a chance to do that.
Yes, this is the spreadsheet that I prepared.
And is it a fair and accurate representation of the accounts that you reviewed, that you were requested to review by the state attorney's office?
It is.
At this time, the state offers into evidence what's been marked for identification as state CB.
Any objection? Then it will be 66.
Doing that. Is there also a digital, the same chart essentially, but in a digital format that has the columns, I guess, differently that you also prepared and reviewed before today?
Yes, the information is all the same. It's just some of the columns may be labeled a little bit different.
Showing opposing counsel what's been marked for identification as states BC. Approach.
May?
Let the record reflect that I'm showing the witness what's been marked for identification as states BC. You recognize this?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
It's should be the CD with the electronic version of my spreadsheet on it.
And did you initial that after having reviewed that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And is it a fair and accurate depiction of what you did with the account information you received from the state attorney's office?
Yes.
At this time, the state offers into evidence what's been previously marked for identification as states BC.
Without objection from the defense, it will be number 67.
Okay. Permission to publish States Exhibit 66.
You may.
Obviously, that's a lot of small numbers. We'll be able to zoom as we need to. But is it correct, from our previous discussions, you would have an easier time discussing with the hard printout?
I believe so, yes.
I'm going to zoom in on this top portion of this spreadsheet so we can sort of see what's going on. Okay, so let's just start with the columns that we have here. So what is the first column, if you can explain that to the jury what we're looking at?
You mean this one here?
Yes.
So this is just the approximate end date of each bank statement. So this would include amounts as of, for example, here, the end of January 2013.
Okay. And this column goes through each month through January of 2020?
Yes, I believe so.
And does that month represent the beginning of the month or the end of the month?
It's the approximate end of the month. Sometimes a bank statement may end on, the 27th of a month versus the 31st, but it's the closest date to the end of the month, the balance for that day.
Okay, so that's why it says the approximate month end?
Right.
Okay. If you could just go to that next column and explain to us what that
These are just it's a timeline of events that was more for informational purposes, since we had statements going back 7, 8 years, tried to key in on some different events. For example, this process improvement solutions, I believe that was an entity of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes, and so we noted here when it was created, and just different timeline events that were of importance.
And then going to the next, it looks like sort of a light blue, and then there's several different columns under that. So it looks like,
Right.
And just to show the jury what we're going to be moving over to, there looks like there's 4 different distinct sort of categories that you've gone through. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So if we can just go back, and you can tell us, what is this first category that we're seeing in the light blue?
So these 6 accounts here, they are accounts that are in the name of David Cooper-Tronnes or business entities associated with him, or also the trust that was it's associated with him.
Okay. So these entities, is it fair to say, are entities or David Cooper-Tronnes himself that are not tied to another person, just David Cooper-Tronnes or a trustee control?
Right.
How about the next category, and that looks like sort of a light yellow?
Yeah. These 2 accounts were accounts that the names on were David Cooper-Tronnes and Carol Cooper-Tronnes.
Okay. And is that, to your knowledge, his ex-wife?
Yes.
Going to the third category, and I'll move the chart over here. It looks like sort of a light red color. If you could just describe this category for the jury.
Yes, so these are the various accounts that were associated with Shanti Cooper-Tronnes and her business entities.
And can you just kind of describe the number of accounts? It looks like the BOA, what does that stand for?
Yeah, so, sorry, those are, BOA stands for Bank of America. There were, let's see, several of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different ones. There was also 4 AXA accounts, which...
And then it looks like you have some description related to those AXA accounts.
Yeah.
Pension, IRA, and then a life insurance account.
Yes, to my knowledge, that's what they were.
And then going to the 4th category, which looks like, doesn't really show up there, but on the actual sheet, it looks like it's sort of light green. If you could just sort of describe what that represents as a category.
Yes, those are joint accounts where David and Shanti are both on the account.
And if you could just go through and sort of let the jury know what the initials stand for each account. It looks like BOA is Bank of America again.
Right, Bank of America, WF is Wells Fargo, and I believe one of them here, 7209, was a brokerage account.
And then there's also a notation, I guess, that the 5297 is a checking account.
Right, yes.
All right, so we've gone through what the different columns are. I want to sort of skip ahead here. Obviously, you tracked, in this chart, essentially, you tracked movement and, I guess, growth or reduction in the accounts month to month in your analysis, and that's shown here in this chart, right?
Right.
Okay, but for our purposes, I want to go to 2018.
Well, then we're going to take a brief recess. We could actually, you can stay where you are if you want to just, yes, you can go get the glasses. You're fine. Go get your glasses. Anyone need a recess at this point? No, okay. And state you may proceed. I got them.
Get us fast forwarded to March of 2018. And obviously, you can't see the top of the spreadsheet, but if you could just go through and show us, March of 2018 would be approximate end of month. What was the total amount balance in accounts just controlled by David Tronnes or his trust? As you pointed out with the, I can zoom in.
So it's down this last line here, should be this amount right here, $136,000 and $33.
So in accounts just held by David Tronnes at the end of March 2018, there was $136,033. Is that correct?
That's right.
I want to go to the accounts related to David Tronnes and his ex-wife Carol Tronnes. If you could point that out.
Kind of hard to see without the top, but
Yeah. So it looks like I'm going to start you here.
Right,
We're in this
right.
column.
yep.
And then I go down.
Right. So about
What amount would that be?
$5,569.
All right, and then now I want to go to, and I'll start up at the top here, but there's Shanti Cooper-Tronnes and her entities, and you did a total amount of what was in all of those accounts at the end of March of 2018.
Yeah. It's,
Let me start here so we're tracking down. And so the total is here.
right. So it's $365,885.
Okay. And then finally, in the joint accounts of both David and Shanti Tronnes, what was the ending balance in March of 2018?
It's $480,700.
Would the total amount in the accounts that were either just Shanti or David and Shanti, would that total amount be $846,585?
That sounds right. I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but yeah.
Okay. And then, obviously, we went through the amount that was just associated with David Tronnes.
Right.
In your spreadsheet, did you also note some events of significance that we talked about in that second column?
I did. Basically, we notated any large transactions, did notate a lot of money being moved around between accounts, particularly in April of 2018 and beyond that date.
And I'm going to put that up because you have that noted on your spreadsheet as well. That's on, I believe, the last page of your spreadsheet. Publish. Again, here. If you could just show us where you have that noted.
So this top row is April of 18, and we noted $425,000 was transferred out of the Wells Fargo brokerage account into the Wells Fargo 5297 account, which I believe it's a joint account, but I think that I'm not mistaken. I think it was a checking account. And then we noted a check was written for $215,000, which cleared the bank on April 30th out of that Wells Fargo account.
You don't have a copy of that check, obviously.
No.
And then these other notes that we see, this just goes on to show sort of banking activity after Shanti Cooper-Tronnes' death. So we've got May, June, July, and you have some notations about large transactions.
Right. $110,000 was transferred from the Wells Fargo 7398 account, which I think was a joint account. We'd have to double check at the top, and it was moved into Wells Fargo 0793, which I believe was an account of David's.
And then at some point you stop. You don't have any more, obviously, statements from Shanti Cooper-Tronnes.
Right.
Now, the amount represented on here in the accounts at the end of each month, that just represents what was actually in the accounts. It doesn't represent any like a life insurance death benefit that wouldn't obviously be payable until death. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So separate and apart from any life insurance or death benefit, in the accounts that were either Shanti Cooper-Tronnes or David and Shanti Cooper-Tronnes, there was $846,000 roughly
Right.
in those accounts at the time of Shanti's death.
That's correct.
No further questions?
The state. Cross.
For the clerk. All right.
All right, good afternoon, Ms. Frank.
Good afternoon.
You were given bank records by the state of Florida to analyze.
Right.
Was that the sole source of your information that you received, or did you do any independent research?
We did a little bit of independent research, some stuff on the property appraiser website, sale of the house, things like that.
Let's talk about that. So what did you learn in your research about the home?
I think I have it noted. I forget the date of purchase, but it was, as far as I could tell, purchased with cash out of the trust account of David Cooper-Tronnes.
And that was prior to his marriage to Shanti?
Yes.
Cooper, correct?
Yes, prior to the marriage.
And do you know the date of their marriage versus the date of the home sale?
If you slide this over a little bit, it's over here. So the house was purchased in April of 2015, and I believe they were married in February of 17.
And did the property appreciate in value during that time?
That I don't know.
And in review of the accounts, I mean, this is forensic accounting, correct?
Right.
So you're looking to try to figure out and develop some ideas of malfeasance or patterns of behavior to assist your client?
I would say that we are just, in this particular case, looking at what amounts are in what bank accounts on certain dates.
So let's talk about that, because looking at the numbers, when David, Tronnes, and Shanti Cooper got together, he wasn't broke, was he?
No.
He had an asset that was pretty valuable in the home, correct?
Yes, it was in the name of the trust, I believe, yes.
Okay. And who was on the trust?
It was, I believe, him and Beverly, which I believe is his mother.
All right. And with that, were there any monies of David's transferred into joint accounts by Shanti, held by Shanti and David together?
There was, and I think you have one pulled up here that I noted.
And can you just recite that for the jury?
Right, there was and sorry, I can't see the date on there, but it was $100,000 transferred from the trust account of David into it looked like the Wells Fargo 5279 joint account.
And what about the line below?
Here?
Check the date. Over August the 17th, right? What does that note?
$150,000 was transferred from the trust account to a joint account of David and Shanti.
So that would be $250,000 at this point.
Right.
All right. And what does continue on? Because doesn't it have any reference also in a branch deposit?
Yes, there was a deposit of $200,000, and then I did see where Shanti had written a check to herself, for that amount, which we don't know what it was for.
Okay. So money's being moved from his account into joint accounts. And what about to investment accounts? Go to the next line below that.
Yeah, there was a $440,000 transfer from Shanti and David's joint account into that Wells Fargo brokerage account. And there was also $120,000 added to the Charles Schwab account.
All right. And I think we're good on.
Thank you.
Everybody fall asleep on me. So, all right. So with that, if you want to go through the totals here, you've got a $100,000 transfer followed by a $150,000 and a $200,000 transfer. So $450,000 from David going into joint accounts, and then some of that subsequently being moved by Shanti.
Yes.
All right. And you note another transfer from the joint account, a large amount, $440,000 transferred from their joint account to a brokerage account, and then an additional $120,000 to a Charles Schwab IRA rollover. And whose name was that in?
Sorry, you'll have to go up to the top because I don't recall. Go this way. You'll have to go to the previous page with the accounts at the top. Yeah, sure. So the Charles Schwab account was in David's name.
Okay. So let's review now. Because David has a home that in 2015 was worth $600,000.
Yeah, I believe so.
He, in his individual accounts as of March of 2018, had 136,000.
Sounds about right.
And they had in their joint account, which David deposited a significant amount of money into, the balance was down to 480,000.
That sounds about right, yes.
What about the AXA accounts? They have any value?
I mean, the amounts are listed on there.
But there is some value.
There is some value, yes.
And then the $120,000 from the Charles Schwab account.
Right.
So 120 plus 136 plus the 480 from the joint account and the AXA accounts plus the $600,000 that he put into the home. He wasn't a poor man, was he?
No.
And nothing about your forensic accounting produced any evidence of malfeasance, correct?
No.
These transactions were notable, but not criminal.
Right.
One moment. Nothing further.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection, defense? No. Thank you, sir. You may step down. You are excused.
Thank you.
State, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the state calls Patrick Mccardy.
And as he is coming in, will the attorneys approach? This looks like this is your tricky. Okay.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Patrick Mccardy, M-C-C-A-R-T-Y, and I am a financial advisor for Equitable here in Orlando.
And can you just sort of explain in a little bit more detail what your job entails as a financial advisor?
I help families save for their retirement, for their children's education, and plan their estates. And most of that is done through selling investment products and insurance products.
And how long have you done that?
Over 30 years.
In your work, did you ever have a client named Shanti Cooper or Shanti Cooper-Tronnes?
Yes, I did.
And did you originate a life insurance policy for Shanti Cooper or Shanti Cooper-Tronnes?
Yes, I did.
What was the amount of that life insurance policy?
I believe it was $300,000 on her life.
Would it be $350,000?
It might be $350,000, yes. I would have to look at the statement.
Okay. And who was the original beneficiary of that policy?
I believe the original beneficiary of that policy was James Cooper, her husband at the time.
Okay. At some point, did her beneficiary change?
Yes.
Was that change in around May of 2014?
I believe so.
And who did that beneficiary change to at that time?
Jackson Cooper, which is the son.
Okay.
Shanti Cooper's son.
After making Jackson Cooper her beneficiary in 2014, did she ever change her beneficiary again?
Yes, she did.
Okay. And when was that?
After she got married to David Tronnes.
And would that be around May of 2017?
I believe so.
And now, when she made that change, did she come to your office to make that change?
Yes, she did.
Did she come with anyone else?
Yes, she came with David Tronnes.
Okay. And at that time, was paperwork filled out to change her beneficiary from Jackson Cooper to David Tronnes?
Yes, sir.
In addition to the life insurance policy, did Shanti also have investment accounts with AXA?
Yes.
And who was the beneficiary of those accounts?
Different people at different times. But
After 2017, when she came in with David Tronnes, who was the beneficiary of those accounts?
David Tronnes.
Okay. I don't have any further questions.
Cross defense?
Briefly, Your Honor, one moment.
You may.
Good afternoon.
Sir, as financial advisor to Shanti Cooper, is that the way that you come to meet David Tronnes?
Yes, sir.
And when they came in to purchase or change the policy, putting David as the beneficiary of Shanti Cooper's policy, did David make a purchase at that time for life insurance?
Not at that time.
In close proximity to it?
Yes.
Okay, and can you talk about that a little bit?
David purchased a policy on his own life. It was sometime after that.
Was it close in time to their marriage?
It was I believe it was after their marriage, yes.
All right, and who was the beneficiary of the policy?
Shanti Cooper-Tronnes.
And what was the value of the policy?
$1.5 million.
All right, thank you, sir. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No. I think we're good. No objection.
And thank you, sir. You may step down, and you are excused from subpoena.
Thank you.
State?
Billy Lane?
Can you approach?
May? And sir, will you raise your right hand, please?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
And you can have a seat.
May it please the court?
You may proceed.
Can you tell us your name, sir, and spell your first and last name?
Billy Joe Lane, Billyllane.
And you are a private investigator, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's what you were back in April and May of 2018?
Yes, sir.
And did you go to 218 East Copeland in Orlando, Florida, on or about, I believe, May 6th, perhaps? and collect some items.
Yes, sir.
Permission to use State's Exhibit 10, Image 22 with this witness.
May proceed.
Somebody else might. In Image 22 on State's 10, where I have the hand here, is that where you collected these items from?
That area and the shelf below.
And the shelf below being this shelf here,
Yes, sir.
with the Swiffer Duster green part?
To the far left of facing the image where the red portion is.
Okay. Once you collected those items, you brought them back and secured them, brought them back, secured them, labeled and packaged them, and stored them in a locked locker?
Correct. I actually packaged him on scene.
And then you turned them over to Stacy Monroe and Teresa Sprague from the Orlando Police Department on April 19th of 2019?
Yes, sir.
At the time that you turned those items over to law enforcement, when you looked at the packages, did they appear to be in substantially the same condition as when you had packaged them on scene?
Yes, sir. They were locked in a locker for that time.
Were you the only one with access to that locker?
Yes, sir.
No other questions of this witness?
Thank you, State.
No questions, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused from subpoena?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Any objection, defense?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. You are excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
State next witness.
Ralph Kalachi?
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Sir, will you say your name and spell it, please?
Ralph Kalachi, first name R-A-L-P-H, last name C-A-L-A-T-C-H-I.
Where do you work, sir?
The Orange County Sheriff's Office.
Back in 2018, specifically in April, where did you work?
The Orange County Medical Examiner's Office.
And when was your start date and your end date with that organization?
I started with the Medical Examiner's Office in September of 2015 and left in March of 2019.
What did you do for that office?
I was an investigator.
And what does a medical examiner investigator do on a day-to-day basis?
We receive phone calls from law enforcement officials and hospital officials about passings. We take preliminary information from them to see if it falls under Florida State statute as a case for the medical examiner's office. And if it does, we respond based off if it's a scene passing or a hospital passing.
So by statute, there are limited circumstances when the medical examiner and his or her investigators get involved with the death of a citizen of Orange County, Florida?
That's correct.
And when law enforcement is investigating a suspicious death, are there jurisdictional boundaries between what law enforcement can do and what the medical examiner's office can do in regards to touching, handling, manipulating the decedent and the decedent's immediate belongings?
Under Florida state statute, once a person passes away, their body is now the jurisdiction of the medical examiner. Law enforcement officials, firefighters, they're not supposed to make any contact with the body.
And specifically on April 24th of 2018, in the afternoon hours into the evening hours, were you working as an investigator for the medical examiner of the 9th District?
I was, yes.
And did you receive notification of a death investigation being conducted by the Orlando Police Department, specifically by Detective Teresa Sprague?
I did, yes.
And did you receive a call inquiring as to whether or not you could come out prior to collecting the remains of the decedent so that you could manipulate the body for law enforcement?
Yes.
And about what time did you receive that call?
I believe it was early in the afternoon.
All right. And how quickly were you able to respond from East Michigan Street out to Delaney Park at 218 East Copeland?
Should have been about a 10-15 minute drive at most.
When you got there, what did you observe?
I was led into the residence by officers. I was led upstairs into, I believe it was an in-law suite. I think there was renovations on the main home. I was led up the stairs, and the deceased was found in like the main bedroom area.
Now, at this point in time, your first of 2 visits to the scene, did you document anything with digital photography, or did you do that only on the second visit?
I took pictures on both visits.
Okay. May I approach the witness with BR for identification?
You may.
Showing you images 2 and 48. Are you familiar with those images?
Yes.
And do they fairly and accurately depict first the address of the property that you went to and then the decedent as you found her?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move these 2 images to BR into evidence at this time. The remainder will be admitted with Dr. Utz at a later time.
Without objection, that's number 68.
Permission to publish these 2 images with the witness?
You may proceed.
Image 2 on States 68. What is this that we're looking at?
This would be in front of the residence, just depicting the address.
And then image 48, what are we looking at?
The deceased is in the middle of what appears to be a bedroom.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. When you arrived, were there obviously members of law enforcement there?
Yes.
Detective Sprague?
I cannot recall specifically if she was there. I believe her partner was there.
And that was then Detective McClellan, but Detective Sharp now?
Yes.
And what were you asked to do for them?
They were interested in the condition of the clothing, specifically if it was wet, as well as certain biological features that happen if someone is asphyxiated or, choked or suffocated. Certain things will happen to the eyes that indicate that such an event took place.
And what sort of background training, education, and experience did you receive prior to becoming a medical investigator, medical examiner's investigator in these areas of signs of death and so on that you were just describing?
I received a Bachelor of Science from the University of Central Florida in Criminal Justice, and then I did a semester-long internship at the medical examiner's office. Following my internship, I was hired by the chief investigator, where I continued with, I think it was about a 4 or 5 months training process before I was able to respond to scenes on my own.
All right, and so Did you touch the decedent as well as her clothing to check for signs of dampness, wetness, or something in between or beyond that?
Yes.
And what were your observations?
The clothing was wet.
And how would you describe it? Absolute soaking wet, like submerged, somewhere in between?
To the best of my recollection, it felt wet. I wasn't squeezing out large amounts of water, but it was not in a drying process, you could say.
And did you touch her with gloves on?
Yes.
And then did you make these observations about the water content by looking at your gloves afterwards?
Yes.
Anywhere else that you manipulated the decedent besides her clothes?
Her eyes.
And what was the purpose of doing that?
To look for those biological indicators, most commonly called petechiae.
And could you spell that for Madam Court Reporter? Sorry to put you on the spot, and if you can't, that's fine.
I can't spell that. I use
But pronounce it slowly and loudly for everybody.
petechiae.
Okay. And what is petechiae?
It's blood spots in the eye. When someone, again, is asphyxiated, these spots will come up in the eye.
And are you just trained to know that that observation is indicative of strangulation, or do you actually understand the mechanism of how those occur?
I was trained on it, and it's been explained to me, but I'm not a medical professional.
Okay. And how do you go about making these observations to see whether there's petechiae in the eyes or not?
They're pretty clear compared to, obviously, a regular person who would have very clear and white eyes. It's pretty clear if you can see it.
All right, so you're looking at the whites of the eyes, I gather,
Yes.
as opposed to the colored iris parts of our eyes?
It's all, you look at it all in together.
And then take us, what do you actually physically do to actually make these observations? Do you lay hands on her?
In this situation, her eyes were closed. There was actually some bruising on some of her eye that made it difficult to open one of her eyes. But you essentially just open the eye, make observation. I'll take pictures. The crime scene investigator will take pictures.
And when you opened her eyes, did you observe any petechiae in either or both of her eyes?
To the best of my recollection, I did.
And was it either or both to the best of your recollection?
I can't recall if it was both.
Okay. Did you do anything else on this first visit?
Not that I recall.
All right. Approximately how much later are you called out for your second visit?
I believe it was several hours.
All right. Into the darkness at this point?
I recall it being later in the evening.
Okay. Now, ultimately, is it the medical examiner's responsibility to transport this body back to the medical examiner's office so that an autopsy may be performed?
Yes.
Is this something you do by yourself, or do you have people that help you transport bodies?
The medical examiner's office here contracts personnel to do the physical moving. I maintain eye contact of the person as they're being transported. Once they're placed in a body bag, I seal the body bag myself. It's transported to the medical examiner's office, and then I meet the body there where I would break the seal, continuing the chain of custody.
So when you come back later, do you take additional photographs?
Yes.
And at this point in time, is that when you kind of, what they call, I believe, shroud the body and put it inside of this bag?
Yes.
And the bag, does it zip tight?
Yes.
And after you collect the remains, during this process, do you bag the person's hands and feet?
Yes.
Why do you do that?
Preservation of evidence.
And did you do that in this instance?
Yes.
All right. So you add bags to the feet and to the hands and then shrouding. Is there anything else that you do as far as the remains at this point?
No.
And then you supervise the transportation of the body to the medical examiner's office on East Michigan Street?
That's correct.
From there, inside the building, what do you do?
Like I said, we weigh the body, break the seal, and then it goes into the cooler where they stay for the doctor.
And is there a reason for breaking the seal of the bag prior to putting the body in a refrigerator?
Just our protocol.
Okay. Do you have anything to do with x-raying, or you just weigh?
We just weigh.
All right. And then that was the end of your involvement with the investigation of the death of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes?
That's correct.
No other questions of this witness?
Cross defense?
Good afternoon. As part of your job duties, do you report anything to the medical examiner in order for them to be more effective at the work that they do?
We write a investigative report.
Okay. Was that part of the purpose in you going to the scene that evening?
Yeah, so we are essentially the eyes and ears of the doctor before they can see them for autopsy. So we make our initial assessment of the condition of the body. We make notations again on, rigor mortis, lividity, certain things like that, and prepare an investigative report for the doctor.
Okay. And did you do that in this case?
Yes.
What is the timing for you to have that report prepared?
By the end of shift.
Okay. On April 24th of 2018, do you recall what the end of your shift would have been?
I believe at that point in time I was working the afternoon shift, 2 p.m. to 10:30 or 11.
Do you recall when you would have been next on shift?
I can't recall that. Most likely the next day.
The next day, okay. So any reports that you prepared for the medical examiner, you would have had those done sometime before 10:30 or 11 p.m. that night?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that you went to the scene twice. Do you recall what time the first time that you arrived was?
Not specifically, no.
Okay. Do you remember approximately?
Should have been in the afternoon, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock.
How much time passed before you went back?
I believe it was a couple hours.
Do you recall what you reported to the medical examiner in the report you prepared?
I would have to see the report to say specifically.
Okay. You prepared a report, correct?
Yes.
Would reviewing it help to refresh your recollection? May I approach?
Refresh on which point?
Attorney's approach, please. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Going to show Mr. J what I'm showing him. Mr. Glatchen, take a look at that. Is that a report that you prepared with regards to this specific case?
Yes.
All right. Once you've had an opportunity to refresh your recollection, please let me know. Did that help to refresh your recollection?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay. What information was it important for you to report to the medical examiner, and what did you inform him?
Just the observations of the body.
And what were those?
Rigor was minimal, indicating that the passing was within the past 12 hours. Lividity was unfixed. There was bruising on her right eye, I believe. There was no fractures of the head. Abrasions were noted on the neck in a vertical fashion.
The prosecutor had asked you about checking for petechiae, and that was at the direction of Detective Sprague, I think you indicated?
I believe so, yeah.
And you said specifically that petechiae is a sign that you learned is a sign of asphyxiation. It's a hard one to say. Is that accurate?
It's indicative of that, yes.
Okay. And then the prosecutor changed that word to strangulation. Is asphyxiation always strangulation?
Not always, no.
Okay. In your training and experience, are there other types of asphyxiation?
Yes.
Okay. What are some of those types of asphyxiation?
The most common other one would probably be self-asphyxiation.
Okay. What about positional asphyxiation? Is that something that you're aware of?
Yes.
Okay. Are there other causes other than asphyxiation, I got it that time, for petechiae?
That's the one that we look for primarily. If there are, I'm not well aware.
Okay. All righty. Since you were specifically asked about the wetness of the clothing, and you were asked specifically to make that evaluation, did you report that finding, that you found the clothing to be wet, to Detective Sprague?
I can't recall if it was her or her partner, but I reported it to someone, yeah.
To someone in law enforcement?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, ma'am. Time to state of CJ for identification and evidence.
Any objection? Number 69.
No other questions?
May this witness be excused from subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection, defense? Thank you, sir. You may step down. You are excused. State next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the state calls Barbara Sharp.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury and just spell your last name for the record?
Yes, my name is Barbara Sharp. Last name is S-H-A-R-P.
And where are you employed?
Orlando Police Department.
And what is your current job title?
Homicide detective.
Okay. And how long have you been a homicide detective?
Since the middle of 2018, so about 5.5 years.
Prior to that, what other jobs did you hold with Orlando PD?
Multiple jobs. So right before that, I was assault and battery detective, and a recruiting officer, polygraph examiner, multiple positions.
And can you just give a brief summary of your training experience that enabled you to become a homicide detective?
Yes, so originally I went to the police academy in 1999, and from there I was employed with the Palm Bay Police Department for several years before coming to Orlando Police Department. And while there, I have taken multiple classes in interview and interrogation, homicide investigations, multiple seminars and classes.
So I want to take you back to April of 2018. Were you a homicide detective with OPD at that time?
No, it was right before I came to the unit. I was actually in assault and battery at the time.
But did you assist in homicide cases at that time?
I did, yes. I was training to go to homicide, so I was doing seconds with them.
And did you become involved in that, I guess, training in the investigation of the death of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And was that on April 24th of 2018?
Yes.
Okay. How was it that you became involved in that investigation?
So that particular afternoon, I was at my desk. I heard the call go out on the radio, and I knew that Detective Sprague was up as lead for the next case. So I wanted to work with her because I knew that she was a phenomenal detective. So I went over there and said, hey, they're calling for homicide. You know, do you need somebody to go with you?
And so essentially, you tagged along with Detective Sprague in her investigation?
That's correct.
Were you involved in the early morning hours, I guess later at night and then early morning hours of April 24th going into April 25th of 2018 of an interview of David Tronnes?
That's correct.
Okay. Would you recognize David Tronnes if you were to see him today?
I believe so.
Is he in the courtroom?
Yes, he is.
Can you point him out and describe something he's wearing for the record?
Yes, it's the gentleman sitting off to my right with a dark-colored jacket and a burgundy striped tie.
Okay. Now, obviously, we're going to be going into the details of the interview more with Detective Sprague, but I do want to ask you about a portion of the interview. Do you recall at any point in the interview David Tronnes appearing to become emotional?
When you say appearing, yes, I would say appearing.
Okay. Did you actually at any point in that interview observe any tears coming from his eyes?
No, never.
Okay. At some point, did you show the defendant a photo of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes?
Yes, I did. I placed a picture in front of him.
And did you leave that photograph in front of him for a period of time?
Yes, for the remainder of the interview, I believe.
How long was that?
Several hours.
At any time while looking at that photo, did you observe him cry any physical tears?
No, not once.
All right. So I want to fast forward a little bit. On August 29th of 2018, were you involved in a search warrant of a residence located at 5347 Tuna Lane, Orlando, Florida?
Yes, I was.
And what was the significance of that residence as it related to the search warrant?
That was the residence where David had moved to. It was his mother's residence, and he was staying there after the investigation began.
Okay. And was he actually arrested at the time that the search warrant was served at that residence?
Yes, just prior to.
At that residence?
Yes, at that residence.
Okay. Did you, and so you yourself were involved in the search of that residence?
Yes, I was.
And did you recover any ring during that search?
Yes, I recovered Shanti's ring.
Okay. Do you recall where it was that you found that ring?
It was in the bedroom that David was staying in a suitcase. It was either under or on the side of the bed.
Okay. And was that ring photographed?
Yes, it was.
Showing opposing counsel what's been marked for identification as state CC. Permission to approach?
You may.
Let the record reflect I'm showing the witness what's been marked for identification as state CC. If you could just take a look at these and let me know once you've had a chance to look at all of the photos. And do you recognize those photos?
I do.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of what you observed related to the ring and its location during that search warrant?
Yes.
At this time, the state offers the evidence what's been previously marked for identification as state CC.
Any objection? Number 70.
Permission to publish states composite exhibit 70.
You may.
is, this. Okay.
Showing CC1 of State Exhibit 70. Can you tell us what we're looking at in this photo?
Yes, that's the inside of the suitcase, the contents.
Okay, and if you could just use the laser pointer and point out to the jury the box where the ring was found.
Oh.
Here, let me make sure.
Yeah, make sure. This box right here.
Are you sure it's the red box and not the black box that's lower in the photo? It's hard to see. If I can see the laser pointer,
Yeah, I don't see the black.
would it be this box here?
Oh, yes. My apologies.
Going to CC2 of this exhibit. Can you just tell us what we're looking at here?
That's the suitcase as I found it.
And can you just circle that with the laser pointer? And is this just a closer view of the suitcase as you found it?
Yes, it is right here.
And then what are we looking at here?
That's the ring box with Shanti's wedding ring.
Is this actually your hand in this photo?
I believe so, yes.
Go to CC5. If you could just,
Yep.
maybe, that's the box that the ring was found?
Yes, that's the box.
And is this just another photo of the ring?
Yes, just out of the box.
You said you yourself collected that black jewelry box and the ring?
Yes, I did.
Showing opposing counsel with the mark for identification as states AM. And did you also collect a red jewelry box that you had pointed out earlier on there?
Yes, I did.
Showing opposing counsel with the mark for identification as AL. Wish to approach.
You may.
Let the record reflect, I'm showing the witness with the mark for identification as states AL and AM. You could just take a look at the packaging here and tell me if you're able to tell what that is.
Yes. Yes, this is the red jewelry box, and this is the black.
And are those the jewelry boxes and the black containing the ring that you yourself collected from the search warrant in August 2018?
Yes.
Is it a substantially similar condition as when you packaged up yourself?
That's correct.
At this time, the state offers into evidence what's been previously marked for identification purposes as the AL and AM.
Any objection?
No, ma'am.
Number 71, number 72.
What size gloves would you need?
Prefer a large. No, it's fine. Gloves?
May?
Once you're able to get those gloves on, use these scissors and just open this container. This is state 72.
Take it out.
Yes. And you go to the box. And Your Honor, if, can we have Detective Sharp step down out of the box public?
Absolutely.
If you could just move your hand, take that ring out of the box, and publish. Close that and put it back in the box. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And Defense Cross.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Detective Sharp.
Good afternoon.
I apologize in advance because I may inadvertently call you McClelland because that's how I've learned about you. So I apologize.
That's fine.
All right, let's start with the rings. You indicated that you were present for a search warrant at, is it Tuna Lane?
Right, Tuna Lane.
And that was whose residence?
That was the residence of David Tronnes' mother, Beverly.
Okay. And I believe that you indicated that you had knowledge that Mr. Tronnes had only recently moved there, correct?
No, I don't believe so. From my understanding, he had lived there from the time he left the residence on Copeland.
Okay. The rings that are, the ring boxes that are in evidence, those were located in a suitcase with other personal belongings of his?
That's correct.
Okay. Had you been present for a search warrant that was executed at 218 East Copeland in the loft apartment on April 30th of 2018?
Yes, I believe I was.
And if I recall correctly, you were there together with at least Detective Sprague and CSI Monroe. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the CSI that was there, but I do recall being there with Detective Sprague.
All right. During that search, do you recall the nightstand adjacent to the bed being searched?
Yes.
Okay. The objects that were admitted into evidence were a pink or red ring box together with a black ring box?
That's correct.
Do you recall those ring boxes being present in that nightstand back on April 30th of 2018?
Not specifically, no.
Okay. Have you ever, would you agree with me that wedding rings, engagement rings, those are things that are very sentimental to people?
Most people, yes.
Okay. Have you seen people wearing a loved one's wedding band on a chain to commemorate that person's life? Have you ever personally witnessed that yourself?
I don't know that to commemorate a life, but yes, I've seen somebody wear a wedding ring on a necklace before, but usually their own.
Now, you also indicated that you were, let me ask you this first. Were you also there at the search at the time that when the house was searched and some personal belongings of Mr. Cooper-Tronnes were also found in that same bag? I believe a passport and some other things?
I would have to know the date and who was there with me, but if you could be more specific on it.
I'll withdraw the question. Let's turn to that interview. You indicated that you did participate in an interview of my client back on April 24th of 2018. Is that correct? Do you recall what time Mr. Cooper-Tronnes was transported to Orlando Police Department?
I'd have to refer to the report for the specific time because it wasn't I that transported him.
Okay. Do you recall what time you arrived on scene?
It was in the late afternoon time. I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5. So I'd have to look at the report for the exact time.
Was Mr. Cooper-Tronnes there when you first arrived?
I believe so.
So you don't have a personal recollection about when he was transported to the police department?
I do not. That would have been at the direction of Detective Sprague.
Okay. Do you recall what time you arrived at the police department to participate in the interview?
I don't know the specific time, but I know the time, around the time that we went in to speak to him.
What time was that?
It was right around, I think, 10 o'clock, maybe 9:30.
And do you recall what time the initial call came out, either the 911 call or how did you, let me ask you, I'll ask it this way, withdraw all of that. How did you come to learn of the incident, the investigation that was taking place at 218 East Copeland?
As I stated earlier, I was on duty at the time. I was working in assault and battery, and I heard the radio call go out and heard them calling for homicide. And I walked next door and got Detective Sprague, and I believe it was in the late afternoon.
Okay. So, and I think earlier, and I understand that you haven't reviewed your report, but that was sometime around 5 o'clock or earlier?
That's correct, yes.
And Mr. Cooper-Tronnes is not interviewed until sometime after 10 p.m.?
Yes, I believe so.
When you first made contact with him at the police department, do you recall how he was dressed, what he was wearing?
He was wearing just regular street clothes, I believe.
His clothes hadn't been removed from him and placed in a paper suit?
When we interviewed him, yes, but not when he first arrived there.
All right, but that's what I'm talking about. When you first started to interview him, how is he dressed?
Oh, he was in a what we call a Tyvek suit because we had taken his clothes.
And describe the Tyvek suit.
It's a white, papery, plastic, one-piece jumpsuit.
Do you know how long he had been wearing that before the interview started?
I do not.
And when you first encountered him, where was he?
In interview room number 7, on the recording number 6 on the door.
And describe the room and the furniture.
It's a basic interview room. Nothing on the walls, a table, and 3 chairs.
Or are all the chairs the same?
I don't recall.
Are they comfortable?
They're okay.
Do you have any idea how long he had been sitting in that room before you arrived?
I don't know the exact amount of time.
Do you know if he had been by himself or with any other people during that time before you arrived?
Yes, I do. I know that there had been several people in and out of the room. There was another detective that had come in and talked to him briefly about just peripheral stuff, nothing specific. CSI had been in. So, yeah, there were several people in and out talking to him.
Anyone other than law enforcement?
Not to my knowledge.
How long did you spend interviewing him?
It was 2 different times during that one time period, and it was a couple hours each time.
All right. Would it be fair to say that you interviewed him during the first time until about midnight?
Probably. I would have to look at the recording. It was mostly Detective Sprague at that time. So, yeah, I would say that's about right.
God bless you. And then you said that there was a break. So approximately how long was that break?
I would say probably a couple hours.
And did Mr. Tronnes continue to sit in that room alone during the break?
Yeah, he was sleeping.
When did you began interviewing him again, probably around 4 a.m.?
No, I believe it was around 2:30.
And how long did that interview last?
Again, it was several hours that we all talked.
Do you remember what time Mr. Tronnes was allowed to leave?
I do not know the exact time. It was early morning.
Was it daylight?
Yes, it was daylight.
Had Mr. Tronnes been provided with any meals during that time?
I believe he had water and a snack.
What kind of snack?
I don't know what was provided to him. I didn't provide it.
During this time frame, from sometime around 10 p.m. until daylight the next day, you weren't with Mr. Tronnes the whole time, were you?
I was not, no.
During the time that he was there, he was cooperative and spoke with you willingly?
He did.
Okay. He was pleasant?
Yes, I would say so.
He was not under arrest?
He was not under arrest, no.
In fact, at one point in time, he was offered an opportunity to take a polygraph examination, wasn't he?
He was.
Okay. He agreed to do that?
I believe so.
Was that able to take place?
No, it was not.
Why not?
Objection, relevance.
Sustain.
But he did remain cooperative, stayed there voluntarily, correct?
He did.
All right. He was able to leave of his own accord?
You'd have to define that for me.
He was free to go at the end of the interview.
Yes, he was free to go.
He was not under arrest.
He was not under arrest.
He was permitted to return to the residence.
He was?
He was permitted to live there, take his personal belongings, all of those things, no restrictions.
You would have to refer to Detective Sprague for that.
To your knowledge. He was permitted to return to the residence.
He was permitted to return to the residence,
You
yeah.
have a moment, Your Honor?
You may. Thank you. Redirect.
No further questions.
May this witness be excused from subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection, defense?
No, ma'am.
You may step down. You are excused. We are going to go ahead and take a 15-minute recess if you will follow the deputy out. Be in recess until 3:25. State ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense ready?
Yes.
Just before we bring them in, I'm going to be requesting a special jury instruction. I just wanted to call it to the court's attention now orally. There was mention of polygraph. I discussed with the defense just the other day that we were redacting that from his interview. There was an oversight. But the authority I'll be relying on is Hepler versus State, 510 Southern 2nd, 1006, fourth DCA case from 1987. Any mention by a witness about polygraph in a criminal case is error.
Thank you. We can bring the jury out.
Thank you.
And State, you may call your next witness.
Amanda McHugh.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Will you state your name and spell it, please?
Amanda McHugh, AMANDA-MCCUE.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Where do you work?
The Orlando Police Department.
What do you do for them?
I am a latent print examiner.
And what do you have to do to become a latent print examiner?
I do the analysis and comparison of latent prints that are submitted by our crime scene investigators and our officers.
Let me strike that. What did you have to do? The education, experience, and training to become a latent print examiner?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from the University of Central Florida. I have over 600 hours of advanced fingerprint training endorsed through the International Association for Identification, and I'm also a member of the Florida division of the International Association for Identification.
Have you ever given opinion testimony in a court of law about comparing rolled known prints to latent unknown fingerprints?
I have.
Approximately how many times?
I would say over 65 times now.
Have you ever not been allowed to give opinion testimony in this area?
No.
All right, now on to what you do. Go ahead.
Okay, so I do the analysis and comparison of latent prints that are submitted by our crime scene investigators and our officers. I write reports on my findings, and I testify to those findings in court.
What is a latent fingerprint?
A latent fingerprint is an unintentional recording of the friction-ridged skin that is found on your fingers, palms, and feet. We leave these prints when we touch a surface or an object. These prints are made up of the sweats and the oils that are secreted through the pores of our skin. Latent means hidden. So in order to make them visible, we have to use some sort of chemical or powder means in order to make them visible.
And every time a human being touches the surface with any of this ridged skin of ours on our feet and our hands, do we necessarily leave behind a latent fingerprint?
Not all the time.
And what factors play into this?
Your skin condition can play a factor if your hands are too wet or too dry. The surface type also plays a factor. If you have a raised surface or that's lumpy or bumpy, you may not leave a latent print there. And also, if you're simply wearing gloves, you're not going to leave a fingerprint.
And once somebody does leave a latent fingerprint, handprint, or footprint, is it there for all of eternity?
It is until maybe some environmental factors play a role.
And what sort of environmental factors play this role?
If it's raining or it's dirt or dust gets on there, it could wipe it off.
How about less natural things? So, for instance, a hypothetical of I wiped something down.
Yes, if you were to wipe a surface or clean a surface, you will wipe any fingerprints off of that surface.
In this particular case, let's start with some rolled fingerprints. May I approach the witness with BA composite for identification?
You may.
Showing you BA for identification. You recognize BA for identification?
I do.
What do you recognize it as?
These are the inked rolled fingerprints that I took of Mr. David Tronnes on May 18, 2018.
All right, and do you recognize Mr. Tronnes in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you point out where he is and what he's wearing?
He's sitting directly to, like in front of me right here. He's wearing a black jacket with a striped tie and blue shirt.
Let the record reflect she's identified the defendant. And so you told the jury a little bit about latent fingerprints. How do you acquire known or rolled fingerprints?
This is done by applying a thin layer of black fingerprinter's ink to all 10 fingers. You roll each finger nail to nail on a white piece of paper. You can do the same with palm prints by applying the ink there and then rolling the palm on the print. This can also be done electronically through a live scan system as well.
In this particular instance, on May 18th of 2018, it was done with the black ink?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will be BA for identification and evidence composite.
Any objection? Number 73.
And approach the witness with BB, which is in evidence as 40.
You may.
You recognize State's Composite Exhibit 40.
I do.
And what do you recognize it as?
These are the post-mortem fingerprints that were taken by CSI Lewis Kane of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes.
So you didn't roll those prints yourself?
I did not.
They're just identified to you as Shanti Cooper's fingerprints by CSI Kane.
Correct.
Were you asked to compare these two known sets of fingerprints belonging to the defendant as well as the decedent to some unknown latent fingerprints?
I was.
I approach the witness with AU, which is 23 in evidence, AV 24 in evidence, AW 25 in evidence, AX 52 in evidence, AY 53 in evidence, and AZ 54 in evidence.
May.
Starting with AU, which is 23 in evidence. First of all, do you recognize this exhibit?
I do.
What do you recognize it as?
This is the latent lift card that was submitted to me by CSI Monroe.
And where was it said to come from?
This is from the interior on glass door into loft north side of the building.
And were you able to identify it to any of the known prints that we just discussed?
I was.
And where did it identify to?
This is the right thumb of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes.
Now, can you just walk the jury through the identification process? How is it that one looks at a known print and an unknown print and makes the comparison and reaches a conclusion?
Sure. We use the ACE-V methodology. That stands for Analysis, Comparison, Evaluation, and Verification. In the analysis phase, we look for class characteristics and similarities and dissimilarities within the prints. Class characteristics are pattern type, for example. We have 3 types of patterns. There's loops, arches, and whorls. We also look at the individual characteristics such as bifurcations, ridge endings, enclosures, and dots. And then we also look at creases, scars, and pores. And then in the comparison phase, we do a side-by-side comparison where we're with the latent print and the known print, and we start looking for those individual characteristics and the intervening ridges in between those characteristics. And in the...
Let me stop you there.
Mm-hmm.
Having done that, is there any quantification or set number of things that must match before one can say a latent print matches a rolled print? What is this industry standard, for lack of a better term?
There is no standard number of points in order to do a comparison or even make an identification. We also look at ridge flow and those characteristics and also those creases and scars.
Now turning to AV for identification, if you could just read the exhibit number as well.
Okay, this one is AV Exhibit 24.
All right, and were you able to match that to any part of the known prints from the defendant or the decedent?
Yes, this would be the right index finger of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes.
And where was that said to have been lifted from?
This was lifted from the exterior on glass door into loft, north side of the building.
AW for identification, and if you would, start by reading the number.
Okay, identification AW, Exhibit 25.
And were you able to match that to any of the rolled prints?
Yes, this was the right middle finger of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes.
And where was it said to have been lifted from?
This is from the exterior on glass door into loft, north side of the building.
AX for identification, and what exhibit number is that?
Identification AX, Exhibit 52.
Were you able to match that to any of the known rolled prints?
Yes, this was the left thumb of David Tronnes.
And where was it said to have been lifted from?
This one was located on the northwest side of the bathtub ledge.
Right. AY for identification?
Identification AY, Exhibit 53.
And was that able to be matched to any of the rolled prints?
Yes, this would be the right palm of David Tronnes.
Where was it said to have been lifted from?
This location is center of the bathtub ledge.
And AZ for identification, which number was that?
Okay, identification AZ, Exhibit 54.
Where, and was that able to be matched to any part of the rolled prints?
Yes, there were two latent lifts on this particular lift card. The first latent lift was a left palm of David Tronnes, and the second lift was also the left palm of David Tronnes.
Where were they said to have been lifted from?
These were both located on the northwest side of bathtub ledge.
Were any of the latent lifts that were suitable for comparison in this case that were submitted to you identified to anybody other than the defendant or the decedent?
No, just the defendant and the decedent.
I have no other questions.
Fence Cross?
Good afternoon.
It's not unusual to find prints of individuals who live in the home on doors and knobs and windows and bathtubs, is it?
I would expect to find their prints there.
And you are able to detect these prints. Are you able to tell what day and time that they were left there?
No.
And with regards to that these were the only prints that you discovered, these were the only cards and samples that were submitted or discovered by CSI, correct?
Correct.
And if someone entered the home wearing gloves, would you expect them to leave prints?
I would not expect them to leave prints.
All right, thank you. Anything further? Nothing further. Thank you.
No redirect. She may be excused.
Thank you. Any objection, defense?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down. You are excused.
Thank you.
State next witness.
Your Honor, if we could briefly approach.
You may. Thank you. And state you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state calls Randall Pennington.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
And you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If you could just introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Randall Pennington. Spelling is Pennington.
And where are you employed?
With the Orlando Police Department, and I'm currently assigned to the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation.
How long have you been assigned to that bureau?
I've been over there since about 2012.
And what are your job duties with them?
Electronic surveillance, primarily forensics, digital forensics, dumping phones and computers.
And if you could just give the jury a brief summary of your training experience that allows you to do your current job.
I would say for computers and forensics in general, I attended IASIS, which is International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists. It's a volunteer organization that's known worldwide. It starts with about 2 weeks of training. They actually do the class here in Florida. And then from that, we do about 6 months of peer review on it, where we take tests and kind of prove that we have the knowledge for it. In addition to that, I've taken several classes in various tools that we use in forensics, such as Cellbrite products, which are used to extract data from phones, Axiom, which is primarily used for computers but can also be used for phones, and just various classes throughout my career.
Now, I want to take you back to April 24th of 2018. What was your job title then?
It was the same. I was still working at MBI, and digital forensics was my primary responsibility.
Okay. And did you become involved in an investigation related to the death of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes?
I did.
How did you become involved in that investigation?
I was basically covering the lab. There's very few that kind of agents and officers that do what we do. So if they're called away or if they're working on something, which I think they were actually teaching at IASIS that week, I was covering the lab in case any digital forensics cases came in.
And did you have occasion to respond related to digital forensics to a residence located at 218 East Copeland Drive in Orlando, Florida?
I did.
And did you have an occasion to collect some digital items?
I did.
Let the record reflect I'm showing opposing counsel has been marked for identification as states I. Permission to approach the witness?
You may.
Let the record reflect I'm showing the witness what's been marked for identification as states I. If you could just take a look at the packaging of that. Let me know if you recognize it.
I do.
How is it that you recognize it?
I could see the handwriting of the officer that kind of collected it, the homicide detective that would have issued it to us. I could see that it's been sealed at the bottom.
And are these items that you yourself took possession of on that day?
Yes. Sometimes we'll collect stuff in a live state, so it won't be necessarily packaged up like this. But it does look familiar, yes.
Is it a substantially similar condition to when you saw it packaged?
Yes.
At this time, the state offers into evidence what has been previously marked for identification as states I.
Any objection? Number 74.
And if you could just, are you able to tell from the packaging what is contained in this?
I can. Just according to the labels that are on the package. There are miscellaneous cables, which kind of collect the power cables for them. 4 cell phones, 2 external hard drives, and 1 Lenovo laptop.
Once you collected those items, what did you do with them?
Once I collect the items, depending on what they are, the cell phones, if they're on, we usually try to keep them on. We'll put them in airplane mode, which protects from a remote wipe and from getting additional, let's say, SMS messages, that kind of thing. So once I collect them, I'll try to put them in an airplane mode to protect the data and the evidence on there, and then I'll transport them back to the OPD lab.
The item I want to primarily focus on is an Apple iPhone 8 Plus identified to Shanti Cooper-Tronnes. Is that one of the items that's contained in the package that was just entered?
I believe so. It wasn't listed on the outside of it. I'd have to open it to actually see it.
Okay. Is that something you need to do? I will. What kind of size gloves do you wear?
Extra large.
I think they're right in front of them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. If you want to set it down, I'll go ahead and take care of it.
And just let us know when and if you're able to locate the Apple iPhone 8 Plus.
I believe this is it right here.
So that's one of the devices that you did some further testing on or extraction. What did you do with the iPhone 8 Plus?
On that day, basically, I was a delivery boy. I went and collected the evidence. And the reason I was collecting is we have restricted access back at the digital forensics lab. So if we're going to put it into the Faraday room, there's only certain officers that can get into that.
Let me stop you there. Yeah. If you could just explain to the jury, what is a Faraday room?
Sure. So a Faraday room, the best comparison that I could give you is like your microwave at home. If you were to put your phone in the microwave and try to call it, it won't go through because there's stuff built into it that kind of protects signals really on a microwave from getting out. Well, our Faraday room is built for stuff getting in. So it's to cut off cellular service, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. So communications cannot be made with that device.
Okay. So you took that phone and the other phones into the Faraday room. What happens there?
At that point, we would have just kind of staged them or run power to them so that they don't die. I believe some of the phones on scene I was able to put into airplane mode. It's just really to kind of protect them. If we take them just back to the lab and just kind of set them on a desk, even though we were able to put them into airplane mode, there is a chance they still could connect by Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So the Faraday room is just a stable platform for that, kind of an extra layer of protection.
And at some point, did you do an extraction on that phone?
I did not do any extractions on the devices.
Was that passed on for Detective Woodyard?
It was.
And so essentially, you took the phones, particularly that iPhone we were speaking of, you put it in the Faraday room, made sure it wasn't turned off, and then it was turned over to Woodyard for his work?
Correct. Like I said, I work over at MBI, so I have a different lab setting that I work in. OPD lab is different from where I work, really just because we're short. It's just to cover that when they're not there. So I'll step in and kind of do the same thing I would at MBI, but just with OPD.
If you could just put those back in.
Sure.
There we go.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, State. Defense, Cross?
No questions for the witness.
Then, any objection to this witness being excused, State?
No, Your Honor.
Defense?
No.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. You are excused. State, you may call your next witness.
Robert Woodyard?
You solemnly swear and affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
All right, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I was preoccupied. If you haven't spelled your name, would you? And if you did, let me know.
Robert Woodyard, Woodyard.
Where do you work?
The Orlando Police Department.
What do you do for them?
I'm the supervisor of our digital forensic lab.
How long have you worked in the Orlando Police Department Digital Forensics Lab?
6 years.
All right. And what sort of background in training, education, and experience did you have to join the lab? And then tell us about any continuing experience and education you've had since joining the lab 6 years ago.
Okay, so in 2012 is when I began my on-the-job training. In our agency, we have this setup where you can temporarily be assigned to other units to express interest or see if it's something you want to do eventually. So that's when I started training under other examiners that are in that unit. In 2014, I received my computer forensic certification from an association called IACIS, IACIS, which involves a year-long peer review phase of just back and forth coach training, learning the specifics of doing computer forensics specifically. In 2017, I went through a similar process to get my mobile device forensic examiner certification. That's from a company called Celebrate, which same focus, learning the ins and outs of forensics as it relates instead now to mobile devices specifically. Since then, I've received hundreds of hours of training. In order to maintain my certifications, I have to show that I continually get furthered education. I'm also, like I said, the supervisor of my unit, so I now have to make sure that my examiners that work under me get the same education as well, and I also instruct on this topic.
Now, around April 24th or after April 24th in 2018, did you receive a bunch of digital devices, including 4 cellular phone devices, in regards to an investigation regarding the death of Shanti Cooper-Tronnes?
Yes, sir.
And how is it that you come across these items? Where do you find them? How are they delivered to you? Take us through that process.
So it can be a number of different ways. My unit is set up to support other officers within our agency. So anytime a detective or officer runs into a device that they believe might contain electronic evidence, then it ends up coming to us. The ways that can happen is they can call us directly to the scene, and we can assist with seizing the device directly from there, or they can have someone seize it and bring it to our unit to work on it there.
And which occurred in this instance?
A little bit of both. We had some devices taken from the scene and brought to the lab, and some devices brought from the case agent themselves. A little bit of a mix.
Okay. Specifically regarding an iPhone 8 Plus that was recovered on April 24th, how was that particular device presented to you?
I believe that was one of the ones that was seized by Agent Pennington.
All right, and how did he bring it to your attention?
He was called to assist on the scene and delivered those devices to the lab. Once they were in the lab, I was notified that there were devices there waiting for examination.
And going into the details later, through the digital forensic imaging and data acquisition from that iPhone 8 Plus, did you come to learn who its owner was said to be based on that data and other information?
Yes, sir.
And who is that?
Shanti Cooper-Tronnes.
And were there two devices, and we'll go into the details later, that were attributed to David Tronnes, the defendant in this case?
Yes, sir.
What devices were those?
May I refer to my report?
Refresh your memory, please read it to yourself, and then let me know if it did.
Okay. Yes.
And for the record, you're reading from your own report?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did it refresh your memory?
It did.
Tell us about the two devices that ended up being attributed to the defendant, David Tronnes.
I have a ZTE Z Max Pro and a Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge.
And was one of those two devices a little bit in disrepair with cracked screens?
Yes.
Which of the two?
The Z Max Pro.
We have some gloves in front of you, and we have eye for identification, which came in as an exhibit as well. Could you glove up and retrieve the phones from that bag to your left? You needn't conceal, it's in evidence if you want to. If it's
Oh, okay. Yes.
What do you have there in your hands?
The ZTE.
Okay. And what else is that the full brand name of this device is just ZTE?
It's a Z Max Pro, the model number. It's kind of faded on here. Let me see.
Let me stop you with this. Apple or another manufacturer? Who's the manufacturer of that device?
ZTE.
Okay. And that particular device, does it have a cracked screen?
It does.
Can you just show it to the jury? All right. And when you do these digital forensic downloads or imaging, do you take photographs of the image of the devices that you're imaging?
Yes.
So you've photographed this device before?
Yes.
Were you able to image it?
Yes.
All right. And can you get the other device? Just get all four phones out, and we'll talk about them one by one.
Okay.
What do you have now?
This is the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge.
And I see that these devices now have white stickers on them. I assume that's not from the manufacturer?
No, that's from us.
All right. And what sort of labeling information is on these devices?
The case number, typically, letting us know what case this device is related to.
Okay. And what type of device was this again?
Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge.
Who did it end up being attributed to?
This one attributed to David Tronnes.
Okay. All right, you can set it next to the ZTE. Next device. That looks like an old phone.
Yes. This is going to be the 5S, the Apple iPhone 5S.
And who was that attributed to after imaging?
I have one for Jackson Cooper's and James Cooper's.
Okay. All right. Set that aside. Next phone. What type of device is this?
This is the Apple iPhone.
In which model?
8 Plus.
And would you say that has a rose-colored case?
Yes.
Who is that attributed to ultimately?
Shanti Cooper-Tronnes.
All right. And you can put that phone down too. Let's take that last phone, the iPhone 8S, as an example. What do you do to extract information from this device? How do you physically do it? What hardware tools, what software tools in a general sense? And we'll dig in deeper.
Okay. So in the most general sense, we have different tools that we can utilize that essentially send instructions to these devices. So depending on the security that's put in place, whether we know the password or not, different things like that can determine what kind of extraction of data we would get. But typically, in the order that we would prefer to get it, we would connect our device to our specific tool, and we would request that that device extracts everything, as literally as much as it possibly can. The device, our tool would try to send the commands to that phone and say, essentially, give me all of your data. If something blocks that, security, again, not knowing the password, something like that, we could try a little bit of a lower level, where instead of getting all of that data, we would get what we call a file system extraction. So instead, you would get all of the files and folders that are located on that device. The big difference would be what we consider unallocated space, or anything that's currently not being used by the phone, whether that's old deleted information or part of the device that's just never saved data before. We wouldn't get that in that type of extraction. And then our final lowest level of extraction, we're just logically collecting what you as a user would be able to see on your device. So if you could open it up and scroll through it and see the text messages and pictures, then that's likely what we would recover as well. And again, this is an automated thing that happens between our forensic software and the device.
All right. Now, you mentioned a file operating system. I will just, without plugging Microsoft, I will give Windows as an example because I believe it's the most popular one, and we might be the most familiar with that one. Can you just kind of analogize how a phone works and stores data for the jury to help them understand by comparing it to like how a computer, would use Windows to store data?
Yeah, of course. I think everyone's familiar with Windows, hopefully, and you probably have a phone, so you've seen what we consider an operating system. And that's really just how you interact with the device. So if you're on your computer and you double-click on a folder and that folder opens, you are using the operating system to do that. That's how you're talking to the machine that you're using. Whereas a file system, like I mentioned, is really just how your files and folders on that device are organized. So if you want to find something, how does your computer know where to look for it and find it? That would be using your file system. So one of the common questions to go along with how these things work is how deletion works within these two systems. So your operating system is designed, again, for you to talk to that machine. So if I open my phone and I delete a picture, my operating system says, you don't want to see that picture anymore. So it doesn't show it to you anymore because you deleted it. However, nothing really happens. A little flag is set within the data that says where this picture is saved in the file system is now available if something else needs to be saved there. But until that happens, that deleted picture just resides for an unknown period of time until finally that piece of data gets overwritten by new data. And that's when finally that file actually goes away.
Okay. What level of extraction were you able to get out of that iPhone 8 Plus with the Rose case?
So that's an extraction that we call an advanced logical extraction. The reasoning for that is it kind of lives between that logical extraction we talked about and the file system extraction. It's not all of the files and folders, so we don't like to call it a full file system extraction, but it's more than what you as a user would see if you just kind of scrolled through the phone. So a little bit of an in-between there.
What sort of software tool did you use to get this information from that device?
Cellebrite's physical analyzer.
And that's the one you testified being trained on and being familiar with and using?
Yes.
How often do you use Cellbrite?
All day, every day.
All right. And can you get, what we would call text messages, and are those called SMS at the lowest level of text messages?
Yes, SMS would be the short message service, which is essentially the point-to-point text messages that most people are used to seeing.
When a device is an iPhone, can you get the little iMessage or iChats or whatever they're called too?
Yes.
Phone calls in and out?
Yes.
Contact information, like who you add as your contacts in your phone?
Yes.
What other sorts of information were you able to extract from this iPhone 8 Plus?
If you can think of it being on your device, it's typically going to be there. So
Right.
GPS coordinates, all that.
All right. How about the health tracker step things?
Yes.
Can you tell us your familiarity with that and what you generally were able to get from this iPhone 8s?
Okay, so for many years now, our devices have gotten to the point where they want to help us with our health. Started off the most simple way of counting your steps, flights of stairs that you take, and now it's gotten crazy to where they're doing all kinds of things, but in order for your device to track that, it has to store it somewhere. So in Apple's case, that data is stored in a database, a SQLite database specifically, where it will keep track of things like when it is registering that you've taken steps or you've gone up or down a flight of stairs, or if it's set up a certain way, it can get your calories burned, and all of that would go into a database.
Was that sort of data extracted from this device, the iPhone 8 Plus?
Yes, it was.
All right. Now, with the software tool, can you generate some of the other data we've been discussing, such as the chats and emails, which I guess we didn't discuss? Can you get emails and web browsing and all that information as well?
Yes.
All right. Can you get it put into all in one place called a timeline, which shows all of this activity that the phone's involved in by date and timestamp?
Yes.
And can you just explain the timeline to the jury?
Yeah, if you think about what's stored on your phone right now, you'd probably think that there's a lot, and you'd be right. So your web history, phone calls, text messages, anything like that, they're all going to have some form of timestamp related to them. So the timeline feature allows us to chronologically lay out these artifacts. So it's not really artifact specific, and when I say artifact, I'm talking about like emails, phone calls. Those are each individual artifacts. This is more chronologically based. So by a day and date and time, it will lay out kind of a view of everything that happened during that day.
And can you tell the jury what an IMEI is and what other information goes into identifying a particular device physically, and then the type of information that shows who may be the owner or user of a device?
So an IMEI is a device or a number that uniquely identifies the transmitter within a handset. So in order for that particular device to talk to a network, make phone calls, receive phone calls, it has to be able to be uniquely identified. Or I would try to call you and it would call 7 different people. That's a number that we use in lieu of a serial number. Essentially, if that number is on that device, there will be no other devices with that same IMEI. And that's a number that we use to uniquely identify that device. In terms of ownership or user attribution, what we typically look for is common signs of use by a particular person. So when you set up your device for the first time, it usually asks you what your name is. It'll ask for your email address. It'll ask for information such as that. Then if you're logged into Facebook and Instagram and people are calling you by your name and you're texting people and saying, hey, this is insert name here. Things like that, eventually at the end we say it is reasonable to say that this person is the person that is primarily using that device.
And what was the name attributed to the iPhone 8s when it was set up in the operating system?
That was Shanti Cooper-Tronnes.
Was there a phone number associated with it?
Yes.
What was that phone number?
May I look?
Yes, sir.
That would be 321-444-8629.
And how does a particular device get a phone number that the phone companies in the rest of the world will recognize as that phone number?
So typically you'd just go whatever service provider you want to go to, and they'll give you a phone number, and they'll usually give you a SIM card along with it. in order to facilitate communication with their network, so that that number will be the number that's used to dial your phone.
All right, now, were you able to extract the health information data, particularly for April 23rd and April 24th of 2018 off of this device?
Yes.
And were you able to extract a timeline and then specifically carve out that timeline for April 23rd and April 24th of 2018?
Yes.
All right. Additionally, are you familiar, and I know the answer to this, but I'm asking it anyways, with iCloud?
I am.
What is the iCloud?
So iCloud is a cloud service available specifically for Apple devices. So not just iPhones, but any Apple device can be used to back up your data, and also is used for what we call continuity. So that's where you can send a message from your phone and receive the response on your MacBook and back and forth, and really just save your data throughout your devices.
And were you asked to review some of the iCloud data relating to Shanti Cooper's Apple ID?
Yes.
And did it come with a business record certification from Apple?
It did.
Okay. And did you specifically review outgoing emails made by her for the month of April, or at least attributed to her Apple account?
Yes.
May I approach the witness with BY and BZ?
You may.
You recognize the contents of BY, a digital evidence item?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize it to be?
That business record you were talking about, as well as the emails.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move BY for identification into evidence.
Any objection?
May I take a look at what you have on there?
May. Will be introduced as number 75.
Mr. Clerk, I'll ask you to review BZ for identification. Did you have an opportunity to review the PDF and the Excel spreadsheet on this exhibit?
I did.
And what do you recognize them to be?
The PDF is the export of that timeline that we talked about, chronologically breaking down some artifacts, and the iPhone 8 Excel in there is a export of the health database.
And is that limited to April 23rd and April 24th of 2018?
Yes.
At this time, the state would move BZ for identification into evidence.
Any objection? Number 76.
Permission to publish 76.
You may proceed.
Starting with the file that's a PDF labeled 42318 and 42418 timeline. What are we looking at here? And let me enlarge it a little bit. What are we looking at here in this numbered column?
Just the number for that particular record.
All right, and then the second column, what sort of information is stored here?
The type of artifact that it is.
So web history, probably self-evident. What about searched items?
Again, just typing in what you would be searching for.
Activities?
Those would come back to those steps or different items within the health database.
Going over to the far column that's visible on the screen, 179850, that's not suggesting anybody took that many steps in that amount of time?
It is not.
What does that suggest?
Without seeing the database entry, which would make it a little bit more clear, it has to have a baseline number to count off of in order to show activity.
Okay. Call log, what would that mean?
Call activity, whether ingoing or outgoing.
And in that next column, it'll show either ingoing or outgoing, like this column?
Correct.
And if it's a 2, it might show the number that's being called?
That's correct.
And then this time over in the far column that's visible, is that how long the duration of the call is?
Yes.
Let's talk about the column with the date there and what UTC -4 means so that the jury understands. Can you tell us?
Yes. So most electronic devices store time in what is called a UTC time, or 0 hour. So time without an offset over in like England or wherever 0 hour happens to be. And then from that particular point, moving in the earth, you would move either plus X amount of hours for an offset or minus X amount of hours for an offset. Here on the eastern coast of the U.S., we jump back and forth between -4 and -5, depending on if we're in daylight savings time or not.
And late April is in daylight savings time, the same time frame we're still in for another couple weeks?
Yes.
All right. Log entries, that's a new one. What is that?
So that would have to, you see on the far right what's actually happening there. Log entries are going to be coming out of logging databases or artifacts that are showing either usage of an application, usage of data, different things like that.
Instant messages, is that what we think it means?
It is.
And incoming and outgoing, self-evident as well?
Correct.
Now, we see that there's a phone number attributed to this one here at 829, also a name. When there is a name, is that somebody that's in contacts?
Yes.
And then below in row 831, we see from 321-444-8629 Shanti Cooper. Is that the phone identifying itself?
It is?
And the name that the person that chose to put into the phone?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I don't believe there's any different items to discuss. So let's go to web history. There's several entries at 1806 and 1807 for Pizza Hut. First of all, 1806, does that mean 6 p.m. for the rest of us?
It does.
So it's just minus 12?
Correct.
And then if it's a number greater than 11, then it means it's PM. Like 0000 would be midnight, 1200 would be PM.
Yes.
Okay. So if there were testimony that ultimately comes out about Pizza Hut for dinner that night, this seems to corroborate that.
It does.
Okay. Looking at row 1068 or 1068, that is an outgoing call made to James Cooper with his phone number? Is that
Yes.
Duration of 3 seconds?
That's correct.
And a quick return phone call almost immediately, like overlapping, it looks like.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that after that call at line 1068 at 10:22 p.m. on April 23rd, 2018, there were no more outgoing calls or text messages or outgoing anything from the device?
Yes.
Turning to the second file, the Excel spreadsheet. All right, first column, again, seems to be numerical, just showing a data entry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You agree?
Yes.
What's going on in this name column?
So not to get crazy, these SQLite databases that we're dealing with here are called relational databases. It typically has multiple different tables used to store the data. So a record will have to have some form of unique name or a way to identify that particular record so that that information can be paired up with more information about that particular record from a different table.
Okay. We'll drop that there. Data type, distance, steps, and then I believe there's also flights?
Likely, yes.
And do those all mean what we think it means?
They do.
And flights doesn't kind of differentiate, at least in this table of up and down?
No.
E and F, those columns show the start and end time. Again, they're in UTC. Is that the same explanation given on the previous file for UTC?
It is.
So it's already corrected from UTC. So 1932 would mean 7:32 p.m. Is that correct for row 16?
Yes.
All right. We won't deep dive into where it's stored, but does that have something to do with G?
It does.
All right. So looking specifically at row 13 and row 12 above it, row 13's entry according to E and F is 4:23, 2018, 11:19 p.m., and ending 4:23, 2018, 11:25 p.m. Is that what this row 13 says?
Yes.
And a distance of 9.07. Is this one of those devices that uses meters as opposed to feet?
It is.
All right. And so, for American purposes, a meter is 3 feet.
It is.
All right. There is no other entry until row 12, April 24th, 2018 at 10:11 p.m., correct?
That's correct.
So this device registered no distance, no steps, no flights between essentially 23-hour span of time.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Clerk, when we have the lights for a little bit. One of the two devices attributed to Mr. Cooper-Tronnes, the defendant, were you able to extract a video from April 18th, 2024, or 2018?
Yes.
Which device was that? The ZTE that's cracked or the other device?
Well, I'd have to.
If that would refresh your memory, please do so.
Okay. Actually, that video is not specifically mentioned. I just have that I took a lot of videos and pictures out of the S7 Edge.
Okay. May I approach with BS for identification?
You may.
Before we get into BS, did one of the two devices attributed to the defendant not even have a SIM card? It wasn't really being used as a cell phone?
That's correct, yes.
Which one was that?
The S7 Edge appeared to be primarily used as kind of like a camera.
All right, looking at the contents of BS.
That's up there.
I know.
Oh.
We're not going to look until it's not up there.
I got scared. All right.
Can you tell me whether you recognize the video?
Yes.
All right. And now, are you familiar with the term metadata?
I am.
What is metadata?
Metadata is essentially data about data. So a particular picture or video or what have you is going to contain some form of information about itself, like the date and time that picture was taken, maybe even the location in which that picture was taken, the device that took it, different things like that.
And when you got this video, did it have any metadata accompanying it off of the device attributed to David Cooper-Tronnes, the defendant?
Yes.
And what was the metadata as far as the date and time?
I would need the actual report for that.
Okay. Do you have your actual
No,
report?
that thing's very big.
Okay. All right. But you do recognize this as something extracted from one of the devices attributed to the defendant?
Yes, sir.
And are there also 3 still photographs taken from that video?
There are.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move BS for identification and evidence.
Any objection? Number 77.
Permission to publish?
You may.
My dad, I didn't know my dad has a new job and he has to come earlier.
The AC's on. Come on.
Love you.
Sure.
My dad has. I have to
He's
go.
right here.
Because my dad gets up early on his new job.
Okay. Just probably say, I don't know. We'll find out.
Love you, Dad.
Love you so much, sweetheart.
Hi, Doggy. Hi, Treasure Bangs. Love you, boy. Mom.
Love you guys so much.
Are you recording me?
Yes. What do you like to say? Go ahead.
Have a good day, guys, and I will record tomorrow.
Love you so much, Jax. Have a good night tonight, okay?
Okay, love you.
Guarantee we'll talk to everybody we need to talk to. We'll do whatever we can do, okay?
100%.
Like we always do.
Absolutely.
Okay, Dolly, come on, boo. Come on, baby girl. That's a girl. That's my girl. That a girl, sweetheart. Okay, are you guys ready? There we go. Good boy, Charlie. Just gonna go, let's see, what we're gonna say. We're gonna go out here where Jackson is waiting for Jim. And we're gonna take a quick look at our pick-a-bean. I think we may have had more frost damage than we knew. There's the cactus. Yeah, there's some new fronds, maybe? Oh, there is a new frond in the middle. This is really slow coming out. You can see it right at the top. There it is. I thought we lost you, Pick-a-bean. And there's the bougainvillea, which is all blooming. Hey, Jim. Big Jim. All right. And here's the breezeway. Here is the house with the center supports and the first set of trusses up. And that's the stairway opening that was the wine cellar. Okay, and two doors on this side. One goes to the garage, and the other one goes upstairs, and that's basically the apartment, which I guess I can actually go all the way up here and show you. You come up the stairs. We've got 3 windows on the side. And then it's just a full open. It's about 800 square feet at the top of the stairs. And there's a full bath as well back in the corner. The windows let in a lot of light. Also a lot of heat, of course. And then we've got a door here that goes to the rooftop deck, which is above the family room. So, all right. All right, I think we got it all. And here's Charlie and Dolly. Hi, sweethearts. Good boy, good girl. That a boy, that a girl. Charlie has his Frisbee, and Dolly is looking for hers. Love you guys. See you soon.
Does the file name refresh your memory as to the possible date and time of this video?
Yes, that's a normal naming convention for a lot of pictures and videos. Just has the date there, 2018-04-18, underscore followed by the unique name of the file.
And Would 17:01:33 correspond to 5:01 p.m. 33 seconds?
Yes.
Turning now to the 3 still images. No other questions of this witness?
In defense, you may cross.
Good afternoon.
Is it safe to say that your job is primarily to know how to extract these files and to obtain the data, not necessarily to understand all the science behind it?
It is my job to understand the science.
Okay. Are you able to program a phone or to build a phone, or are you just learning the science about extracting it and how the files work?
I also have to know how the phone's hardware works.
Okay. But you're not designing the systems, correct?
I am not.
Okay. Have you had any specific training through Apple as to how their health tracker app works specifically?
Apple doesn't do training for forensics, but there's lots of documentation on how they do what they do.
Okay. Have you, as part of your education, have you done any specific education about health tracker apps and how they work?
Yes.
Okay. And have you done any, have you learned anything about their accuracy through that training?
Yes.
Okay. Have you read some of the studies that show that they are notoriously underreporting steps?
Objection, improper impeachment.
Sustained.
What kinds of things have you learned about the nature of the health tracker apps and how they register steps?
I know that they're using different pieces of hardware within the device in order to track what it is believing is a step.
Have you read any articles about their accuracy?
Yes.
Okay. And have you read any articles that are negatively talking about the accuracy of the step counters?
I have.
Okay. And what kinds of things have you learned about the accuracy of step counters?
That they can be on par, they can be a little bit over, and they can be a little bit under.
Okay. So they're not entirely accurate.
Correct.
Has the technology with the Apple Health Tracker, has it changed since 2018?
Yes.
Has Apple taken steps to make it more accurate over time?
Among other things.
Now, the health tracker, it only tracks your steps when the phone is on your person, correct?
It depends.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Were you asked to do an extraction or any analysis of any type of Apple Watch?
I was not.
Fitbit?
No.
Garmin?
Nope.
Any other body-worn tracking device?
No.
Okay. So the only thing that you were asked to do was to extract this particular phone?
That's correct.
Today you've only been asked to talk about the Apple step tracker information, correct?
That's not how that works.
Okay. Tell me about that.
I don't have to examine the devices that can feed into that database to see the results from those devices.
Okay. As far as that Apple tracker, do you have any personal knowledge of whether it was tracking based on a body-worn device or just the phone itself?
I do not.
Okay. I'll leave that alone. Based on your knowledge of the Apple Health Tracker, are you aware of whether it continues to count steps when there's a loss of signal?
Signal in terms of?
Cellular service.
Yes, it will.
It will continue?
Yes.
Did the iPhone 8 belonging to Ms. Cooper-Tronnes, are you aware of whether it had a sleep tracker?
I do not know.
You didn't find any records of that in your extraction?
Not that I saw.
Based on your training, do you have any knowledge about whether if you pick up your phone to look at it, to check a text message, if that registers steps?
No, I wouldn't be able to say if it would or wouldn't. You'd kind of be hit or miss.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Just briefly. Did you check whether or not those devices had been connected to any Wi-Fi's?
Yes.
And was the iPhone 8 Plus in the Rose case connected to the Wi-Fi in the residence as of about 5:30 that evening?
It was.
Acceleration. Are you familiar with that physics term?
Yes.
Is that something that is measured by these devices in order to generate step counts?
That is one of the many sensors, yes.
Do they also have gyroscopes?
They do.
What's a gyroscope?
Picking up your bearing.
Okay. And so, barring some way of very minimally accelerating the movement of this phone device, it's unlikely to have picked up extra steps without being moved by some external force, correct?
That's correct.
And as far as undercounting, your testimony is if somebody grabs it real quick and looks at it and puts it back down, you're not sure if that would register a step or not.
Correct.
Okay. But we do know from the data in this phone that it does register flights of stairs.
It does.
Did so several times in the last 2 days of data, April 23rd and April 24th, correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Anything further from this witness, defense?
No,
Any
ma'am.
objection to this witness being released?
State doesn't.
No objection.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you.
And you are released.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Approach. We're going to go ahead and recess for the weekend. I want to remind you again, you'll be able to recite this by the time I'm finished, but that you're not to talk to anyone about this case, including each other. You're not to do any research about the case, look up anything about the people or places involved. It includes newspapers, computers, anything else, television. You're not to allow anyone to say anything to you or in your presence about the case. If anyone attempts to, stop them, tell them you're on one of the jurors trying the case, ask them to stop. If they persist, leave them at once and immediately report the matter to the court deputy. We will be in recess until 9:30 on Monday. Have a good weekend. You can follow the deputy out. State, anything else prior to recess?
No, nothing further from the state.
Defense? Then we'll be in recess until 9:30 on Monday. 2.
Today.
Yeah.
much as you can do it as is with the little bags in the box. Good. I'll straighten that. Thank you.